Today, we're talking to Megh Gautam, CPO at Crunchbase, about his journey from engineering to product leadership. You're listening to Joel Beasley, Modern CTO.
Now, a lot of the reason why people are listening is because they're trying to grow as a technology leader. And I was curious, what's your trajectory? How did you go from individual contributor to the technology leader you are today?
Yeah, I think a large part of this has been just the mindset that I've had, which is if you're not learning, you're not growing. And so I would still like to believe I'm still learning how to be the leader that I would be proud of. But I started in technology. I was an engineer. I was at Microsoft for about 3 years. Then I decided I wanted to move into more sort of product management-y work, which is basically, why are we doing the things we're doing? Like, why is performance important? Like, why are we writing this particular line of code this way? And those like fundamental questions you can only answer when you get really, really close to a customer. And that's what got me interested. And then I had tours with startups, companies that I worked at, got acquired. Then I did the public company tour. I was at Dropbox, I was at Twilio. And then I found myself using here at Crunchbase. And I'd used Crunchbase, I think, every single company I've been at, because it is the definitive source of like private market information. And so it was just like really, really helpful to be back and see things from the other side and be like, hey, if I were using this, what would I really like? And that's led me here to my journey.
So when you made that transition from engineering to product leadership, what are some of the mistakes that you made?
Oh, too many to list. Like there were too many to list. I always thought that if I had this like really cool, elegant idea that would shave off some time, or like, because of my engineering background, I'm going to be amazing at like figuring out the solution and be the first to go deliver it. So classic biggest mistake I've ever made is like, oh, I've become a product person. All the ideas must necessarily come from me. And that, I think it took a manager just like pulling me aside and being like, that's not how it works, right? Like you don't have to try to suck the oxygen out of every conversation. Those were the exact words he used. And I was like, yeah, that is what I'm doing. And learning that and getting comfortable with the fact that you're more of a facilitator versus just the person who's imposing their will on a conversation has been a core learning. And two is like just the classical mistake I think everyone makes, which is spend too much time on the solution, not enough time on the problem. It's the whole old proverb, right? Like if you had like 2 hours to cut down a tree, you should spend the first hour and a half like sharpening the axe, or some similar metaphor.
So those are the two big takeaways from your transition. And then how long ago was that? Give me some understanding of time frames. When did you make that transition from engineering to product leadership?
It's been about a decade at this point.
About a decade. And then if there's someone listening right now that's either already made the transition or they're thinking about it, what would you say to them?
I would counsel them on two things. One is like time spans are a real thing, where if you could figure out what parts of this job or this role do you really enjoy, like just test it out, because you need to know how you feel when you're doing this job. And a large part of initially when I got interested in the product world was like, this is a cooler thing to do, or there's like less of these people. And it's very much like the games that we play inside our heads, which is, do people want us to be this, or do I want me to be this? And so to a person watching, I'd be like, hey, test it out. See how you feel at the end of it. Do you actually like who you are? And then do you like what you do? Because a lot of it goes back to identity, which is I think that the work that I'm doing makes me feel good about myself. And that is a huge part of being successful at the role that you're doing, especially if you're at the intersection of like product design or even engineering.
How did you figure out that? I've come to the same conclusion about identity driving everything. How did you figure that out?
I got into places where I was like, I should feel really good about the work that I do. And then I was like, I actually don't. And a lot of it was, oh, there are stints and there are places in your time where even if you're given the opportunity, you would not capitalize on it because you haven't built up your own conviction in the work that you're doing. And to that part of myself, the only advice I offer is like, just go for it. Like the worst that you can have is like, hey, you took your best shot and it did not work out. But the worst thing you could do is to go at it with like, I don't know if this will work or not, and then just try to get to a spot where you're not fully committing. It's the whole like do or do not. There is no try. Like just commit fully and do it.
Come on, Yoda.
Exactly.
So you said time spends. I've never heard anybody actually, it's somewhat intuitive what it means, but I've never heard anybody phrase it that way. Can you explain to me what time spends are?
Yeah. So in terms of like, we have, just as humans, right? We're like, hey, I'm committing to this job and this is me for the rest of my life. And that almost like never is the case. So you could basically like take some time and you're like, in this season of my life, I want to experiment or I want to explore. And once you put that spin on it, it becomes much easier for you to spend your time and try to do your best, knowing that, hey, this is not what you are signing up for like the entirety of your life. An old colleague of mine was really good at this, where you're like, hey, you have to do like tour of duties, or you have to understand what you're inherently good at. And there's like various different ways of saying it, but it's essentially that. It's like you have the permission to try something different with the full intention of like, you don't know how it's going to work out for you.
Interesting. So for people who are thinking about making that transition, engineering to product leader, one way to frame it would be, I'm not gonna take the opportunity. I'm just gonna double down on what I'm good at, and that's one frame. Another frame can be like, yeah, I think this is a good opportunity. I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna go into it knowing that like this is just a season of experimentation and seeing how it goes. And if I don't like it, I can always just go back to what I'm doing now. Would that be
That's
accurate
exactly it.
assessment? Okay.
Totally. And I think if you look at companies of the past, there used to be like these rotational development programs where you could spend some time in like analytics or marketing or engineering. And then you could come back and you're like, I have spent 6 months in each of these disciplines. I really like that department the most. And you're making a thoughtful decision based on time spent. And that, I don't think it happens as much these days, but certainly as you go along in your career, it happens even less and less, which I think counterintuitively is why a lot of people like startups, because they go there and you're like, hey, many different hats to wear. I don't have to specialize. And I think it's a core reason why people enjoy the fact that you can work across different functions and truly see your impact across the board.
Well, another thing that wasn't so clear to me was when you're evaluating it, you typically look at the role and responsibility, like how I'm going to be spending my time. That's like one vector. The other vector, though, is the people who are naturally attracted to that type of work, like personalities. And so there's been times where I'm like, oh, it'd be really cool to do something over there. And I went over to that sector, like I'll share personally. Specifically, it was a HR leadership software. And so you have to sell to HR. And I started spending like a lot of time with the HR people. And I'm just like, these are not my people. There's nothing inherently like bad about them. It's just like the people who are attracted to that job are just like not my people. And so instead I found, where the mix of the work that I find interesting and enjoy doing and the people I like to spend time with. So to your point of tours of duty, it's going to give you exposure to that work, but also exposure to the culture of the people that are currently doing that work.
Totally. I could not agree more with you. And I'll kind of improv and go sort of yes and on this, which is, it's like the kind of customers that you're serving. Is it enterprises? Is it like small businesses? Is it mom and pop shops? Is it a person? And I found myself really struggle to get an idea of like what a person who games a lot is like intrinsically motivated by. So like if it's a consumer mobile app or if it's like a consumer video game, I'm like, I actually don't think I relate well to this particular population, which means I can't empathize, which means like I don't think I'm going to be good at this. And so in addition to like the kind of people that whose lives you're making better, because we spend so much time working, it also is like, how are you reaching them? Is it direct? Do you spend like months in the sales cycle to sell a 100K deal? Or is it just like swipe a credit card? Like that also matters quite a lot, because some people are just oriented towards like, oh, I'm just going to like move this jigsaw puzzle here and it's going to complete the whole puzzle for me, which is a lot of enterprise sales. And some people are like, yeah, I'm just going to figure out a way to make distribution work. Like TikTok videos and money comes in. Like it's just a whole different motion there.
And you got to try things. Like you've got to try. I wish I could tell you I had the answers. I don't. I'm still experimenting. Because the problem is I change.
Yeah, exactly.
So I find things that I like, and then I achieve a level of mastery, and then my interest changes, and then I'm back to the experience. It constantly feels like I'm going back to square one. But at the same time, if I check like my net worth, I'm like, okay, well, I'm clearly like not screwing up, long term. But right now I feel horrible, and then I've just got to figure out how to reduce the distance between feeling bad and feeling good again,
Yeah, I mean, I think the number of times that I end up picking up some like intro to something article, because like it's not just you, like you definitely change and grow and mature, and like the things that you find interesting change, but also the market all around you, where you're like, the market changes, it's shifted, everyone values this other thing now. Or like AI and foundational models were not a thing 3 years ago outside of like a very specific audience, but now they're everywhere. Like my mom called me yesterday and she's like, well, will this AI thing take all of our jobs? I was like, how is this like the sort of the dominant social conversation which we're having? So there's a lot of variability, and the pace of change is just crazy.
But it definitely is going to. Now, yeah. I stumble across something. I've got, a nice group of friends that I've known for 10 plus years, and we're all in tech, and we text each other back and forth. And I have found like if I were to chart the progress of that text, I am texting them on a multi times a week, like 2+ times a week, at jaw-dropping discoveries that I'm seeing in the marketplace. Whereas 3 years ago, it was like, I don't know, once every month or every quarter, there was something good to share. Like, have you seen this trend of these, they're calling them digital employees now? Have you seen this? That one dude yesterday just raised like $20 million or $40 million from Andreessen Horowitz to scale up, but they're no longer selling you the CRM software as like, here's CRM, here's features. They're selling you Bobby, and like Bobby can achieve these outcomes, and then you pay for Bobby to achieve them, and you just let Bobby work autonomously. That is insane.
Yeah,
that's the future.
I agree with you on your like first point of like just the pace of innovation has been game changing. Like the thing that blew my mind was like how quickly these like video avatars went. Like if I look back, I was like, okay, the hands are weird, right? Like there's always a sixth finger or something, and those are pictures. And now all of a sudden you have like a remarkable talking head video. And I think I was using one of these AI video gen companies, and it's really, really good. But to your point, right? Like I think the marketing is brilliant of these things, which is we sell you the work. Like, don't worry about the seats. Don't worry about SaaS. Like, we're gonna sell you the thing that you care about, which is, are you getting more leads? Are they coming in? Are they qualified? And I think it's this like correction against SaaS software trying to sell seats for sort of every employee. And then that pivoted to like usage-based pricing, which is like you just pay for like what you use. And now you're seeing this marketing moment connect where we're like, we will do the thing for you. Do not worry about it. And you have hired this thing to do the job for you. It's like this perfect mix of the technologies kind of getting there. The reaction from the buyers has been like, we can't pay for everyone to have like 12 different types of point solutions. And just like the way that the macro is working right now, where it's like, hey, we just have to get super efficient.
And I want to get into like the new AI developments. And I was a customer of Crunchbase for many years, and I want to get into all of that. But before we do, I just want to see if there's anything more at all to add. Like, I'm going to sell this as like a masterclass, essentially, when I put it in the title on transitioning from engineering to product leadership, right? Be like, this is the guy. You shared a ton of good insights. Is there anything else you want to get out there to the world about that transition?
I still fall into this trap today, but it's like if you are transitioning, but if you're thinking about transitioning from engineering to product, you have to like talking to people, and you have to spend time with your customers. And the interesting thing is like everything about the whole like sort of history of product management. Oh, you have to be agile, you have to do this thing, you have to write this other backlog. Like all of those activities take you away from talking to your customers. And so if you think that you've just like saturated talking to customers, or that's the thing you don't inherently enjoy, like you still have more conversations to get to, and it's probably not the right field if you don't enjoy talking to customers about their end goals, because it's until, things massively change, it's still solving a human problem, which is a business problem delegated to a person.
Very cool. You get it, man. I like you.
Thank you so much for listening. And if you found this episode useful, please share it with a friend or a colleague who you think would get value from it. And if you have topics that you'd like to hear discussed on the podcast, either add me on LinkedIn or send me an email, joel@moderncto.io. Every time I get an email or LinkedIn message, it absolutely makes my day and inspires me to keep going.